So thank you all for joining. This is the Breaking the Chain breakout session today, so appreciate it. For those who don't know me, my name is Jim Campbell. I'm one of the managing partners here at Opkalla. First off, let's do a down the aisle introductions, name, title, and what you do.
I'll start it off. Terrell Funderburg, I'm Executive Director of Cybersecurity Architecture at Sealed Air, or now known as C. I'm responsible for translating most of our business requirements into kind of technologies led through the security lens. So Chief Security Architect and handling all things security related in terms of major projects.
I'm Noah Davis. I'm the CISO at Ingersoll Rand, which is a large industrial manufacturing company.
I'm Eric Wells. I'm the Cyber Business Advisor for the North Carolina League of Municipalities. We're a 100-year-old advocacy group for the 512 municipalities across North Carolina. I currently provide vCISO services for the underserved municipalities throughout the state.
Hi, again, I'm Jeff Garrett, VP of Solutions Architecture at Opkalla. So I've been doing a variety of IT jobs. I go back a long time ago on the customer side, working for a global manufacturing company that I did for 9 years in various roles, and then into the reseller side for 11 years in cybersecurity and data center infrastructure, and now here at Opkalla leading the technical charge. As far as, like I said, I've probably seen a lot of you in chats, but both from dealing in partnering, working with our vendor partners and how they fit in our portfolio, working with our customers on solution sets, and then working to educate our trusted advisors that you've been hearing from throughout the day on what's coming down the pike and what's going on strategy-wise in the market.
Yep. Well, thank you all for joining. We know it's a busy time of the year, and appreciate you guys making time for us. But so today, during our session, kind of the objective is to talk at cybersecurity at a higher level, and obviously we have a great group of folks on stage. I want to kick off with something William talked about earlier in the day, and that is around just social engineering, and let's just generalize as phishing, right? So I looked up a stat before today that 91%, according to Deloitte, 91% of cyber attacks start with phishing. So it's something that everyone in this room, if you're at an organization and in a security role, you're mindful of. To kick off, and maybe Trell, you could start. What has C done, or what's your impression of the phishing pandemic today, and what are you doing to try to stop it, address it internally? Maybe you could touch a little bit on that.
Yeah, for sure. Normally when I start kind of assessing like a cyber program from an architectural standpoint, the number one threat is always phishing. It's always phishing. And you kind of start to threat model your program from that phishing perspective. So you start layering security controls such as email filtering, kind of your traditional controls. And go from email to the endpoint, and kind of detecting kind of privilege escalation and lateral movement. So the more interesting thing I think about phishing is that the fundamental threat is always there, but what's happening, what I've been seeing happening is almost a mutation of that same vector into modern collaboration platforms. So most people think of phishing as kind of email phishing, which is what a bulk of it is, but I also see it transforming with the transformation of underlying technologies like your chat GPTs and AI and generative AI. So the email phishing is becoming more effective, but also the vectors such as Teams, non-email Teams-based phishing, targeting newly adopted technologies in modern operations such as like mobility and kind of collaboration platforms, from the sense of, hey, your Microsoft account is about to expire, right? Everyone saw those. And if you think about the pandemic of 2020, everyone starts working from home. They start getting a phishing email and say, hey, your account is about to expire. You're not going to be able to access your email from home. So I think the more fascinating thing about phishing, that even the traditional vector is the mutation of how the phishing is delivered and interfaced with your kind of global workforce.
Great. Yeah. So Noah, I'll pass it to you. All right. So in the phishing let's stay on this topic. I think everyone here agrees that users tend to be the biggest risk vector, right? And hence why it's 91% effective. But in terms of deploying a education strategy around phishing and at a size of Ingersoll Rand, how have you attacked that? What's the process you guys go through to try to keep all your users up to date, understand the landscape, and protect it?
Yeah, so we actually just revamped this. A lot of organizations kind of take that approach of, hey, we'll do the new hire training that's 60 minutes long, and then every year you got to do one that's at least 45 minutes, right? But if you look at the scientific studies on how you retain information, that doesn't really work. So the other thing I never liked was the stick. I like the carrot. So we've totally switched it up, and we do 2 phishing simulations a month, and then from the training aspect, we do monthly micro trainings, so 5-minute trainings of videos and different things, and we've embedded that into employee goals so that it becomes kind of mandatory to raise the level of awareness, right? And I'm an eternal optimist, so I'll always bet on people. I'm kind of sad I'm missing the other panel, right, about developing leaders, but if you can't engage your employees to understand and make it relevant to them, then you're gonna lose the battle, right? All you got to do is move the needle just a little bit. So come in, be happy, tell them why it matters, and then gamify it at the end. So the top 20 participants in ours get basically the equivalent of $100 in company store kind of gear and materials for participating and taking things, right? But reward versus shame.
Yeah. Well, that we're hearing more and more of the gamification of different policies and procedures to try to, as you said, kind of incentivize or empower the user, right? Eric, this is, the whole phishing idea is a little bit more unique to municipalities, especially those who are probably have less resources, both in funding and people, right? So when you advise your folks and your customers, what message are you sending them? How is the rural county in somewhere in North Carolina protecting themselves and kind of getting ahead of this phishing idea?
The sad part is that for the most part they're not. Unfortunately, their number one attack vector is email, because typically they don't have a large technology stack. They have flat networks, but they keep a lot of sensitive data. I mean, they have all the information on their utilities, so they have PII on every resident of that community. Their police departments have, lots of information on people that they keep that they don't want other people to have. So phishing is the number one risk for those organizations, and I'm surprisingly finding that they're not doing user awareness training. So, and we heard today that, user aware, we all know, I think on this panel, that user awareness training is absolutely effective when it's deployed correctly and done in a manner so that people can understand it and it doesn't become a rote year-long thing where they remember. So we know that it's effective, but municipalities are getting hit in larger and larger numbers because they're not getting that training. So I think for me, and what I'm working on right now, is trying to find ways that we can provide that training for those organizations and at least get their employees to a point to where they can start to recognize. We heard today, though, that with AI, it's getting harder and harder even for people that are trained to recognize what is a phish and what is a not. So, so from my perspective, having to get down to the basic cyber hygiene basics with these organizations, get them into some sort of a user training, and then work with them to ensure that their users are actually taking advantage of the training, because also in municipalities we're dealing with large amount of attrition and turnover. We don't have a lot of employee retention outside of the main municipal office. And we also have elected officials that come in and out, and in a lot of cases, they may not be as technological savvy as in some other industries or other corporate environments. So big challenges there across the state in most of the smaller municipalities. I wouldn't talk about the large municipalities. They have extremely well built out programs, but these are the communities who typically have small staffs and very little budget.
Yeah, yep. Jeff, maybe you could speak to this, because you get to engage with all the different verticals and size organizations, right? So you might have a perspective on, as we talked about, big or small phishing is a problem, right? But in your perspective, do you feel one vertical seems to be more at risk? Is there anything you've pulled from kind of the conversations over the years and years you've been doing this?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's probably obviously verticals that are targeted a little bit more, but none that are at risk any more than others. I mean, the biggest thing over the last few years has been the adaptation of threat actors to where they've gone from attacking the big organizations to attacking smaller organizations in the supply chain of those organizations to get in through the back door. So really that puts everybody at risk because, the two-person mom and pop shop who supplies resources to bigger providers or to the provider that then supplies the resources to the bigger providers can be an attack vector, right? So I think we see a shift away from, where it used to be, yes, I go after the whales as a threat actor to I go after everybody because there's, that little fish leads to a bigger fish leads to the next biggest fish type rollout. I agree with, some things that everybody has said here as far as, when you think about phishing, yes, primarily we think about email and we think about email attacks, but we had an internal chat just this week where somebody asked, the question about, have somebody asking about smishing and things coming in over SMS, right? Coming in over text messages. How do we solve for that? Well, that's a complicated area to solve for, especially when you maybe don't control the device of the user doing that. And those things start making you think, like, I have to have user awareness training at home with my teenagers because guess what? They will probably get smished, right? And, who knows what they'll give out. And I think that leads to the example of what I think we're seeing in some of these attacks now, right, is gone in the days really of spam being a way in, things like that, is spear phishing, and I'll call it even more so than just spear phishing, it's emotional phishing. It's playing on fears. Again, this is, maybe showing my age a little bit because I know Facebook's not the hot thing anymore, but like I saw this with so many like my parents and older generation of something going around on Facebook recently, like so-and-so was in a crash, right? It has a video and it's playing on the fear of something happened to somebody click on this, like you got to see this. And I see a lot of that emotional, like playing on the fears, like, oh my gosh, I know I shouldn't do this, but is this real? Like, I'm afraid if I don't look at it. So, the user awareness training, right, I think it sounds cliche at this point, but to me, the number one protection thing because vectors change, right? So we can put all the security we want around email, but the minute somebody gets a strange request on Teams and they accept it, and now they're in a chat channel with a threat actor on Teams because we weren't monitoring that, right? Their training is going to help that. And one more thing I'll touch on is the gamification is, I think gamification is great. I think one thing that I've started to recognize recently and we need to think about as IT organizations is IT is probably in any organization today the most multi-generational department in the organization. And every one of us, right, from boomers to Gen X to millennials to Gen Z and going on to the next one, have a different way we respond to things. And I think we need to think about that in our user awareness training and how we roll that out, is that who's my target audience, right? Not just in IT, but elsewhere. But I have a multi-generational, workforce, especially in IT, that I need to think about how do I change how I target and how I train them for phishing, because they're going to respond differently to gamification versus slap on the wrist versus other things.
Yeah, great point. And what we talk about today and probably 24 months might not be quite as relevant. So it's interesting how just how things have been changing. So now that we've talked about phishing and that being kind of the most easiest breached vector at 91%, let's segue to credential harvesting, right? So they've now made their way into the organization. They're taking usernames, passwords, and then ultimately, hopefully, leading to a more valuable asset of company data, organizational data, IP, things of that nature, right? So the whole idea here is what are organizations doing, and Noah, I'll kick off to you first, but what are organizations doing to prevent the credential harvesting? That could be certain controls, processes, tools. Just speak on that, because this seems to be kind of the linear approach, right? They get in, they wait. Sometimes this could be 6 months until something else slips up, and then they get the goods. So talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, it's really the approach to layered defenses, right? There's no silver bullet to protect all of it. So when you're thinking about credential harvesting and data exfiltration, I always speak in analogies, right? So that's what I'm going to use. We utilize a 24/7 managed detection and response firm, right? And the way I liken that, and I explain it to our executives, is the more data I feed in, whether that be from an endpoint log, whether that be from an EDR, an XDR, NDR, like all of the acronym soup of tools that we have, make sure it's going in, because that creates a spider web around your organization, right? And then as they move or they try to do those things, there's a tingle. And then the big mean spider, right, like from The Hobbit, goes flying towards them, and you hopefully contain it in time, right? The fundamental premise is we have to be right 100% of the time. The threat actor has to be right once, right? You can't bat 100%. Right. So start from the premise that you're compromised, and it changes the way that you build detections.
Yeah.
Because if you start from the point of compromisation, what's the most valuable thing? It's not preventing them from getting in. It's your speeded detection and response. That's right. So I want most of my investment dollars spent there.
Yeah, that's interesting. Terrell, maybe you could add some context to that, but that's a really good point, that it's not a matter of if they're going to get in, it's when, and then how quickly can you target and find it. Yeah. What do you think, Terrell?
Yeah, so interesting enough, kind of what Jeff was mentioning about Facebook. Over the years, the most successful internal phishing campaign has always been your Facebook credentials has expired. It's the one that always hits the most people, and it's the most successful internal phishing campaign. But to roll into credential harvesting, from my perspective, like as I'm kind of following that threat model from external phish, it's the identity, the visibility you have of all your identity events in your organization, from mobile devices to kind of on-prem domain authentication, centralizing those authentication events into a central policy engine, and then layering that with MFA. I know that can be kind of a behavioral-based problem in some organizations. A lot of people don't like it if they don't have it already. But it's a good, I call it a risk receptacle or a risk mitigation strategy for credential harvesting. So if your credentials are somehow compromised via a phishing email and someone logs in, I don't know, in APAC, and they normally work in the US, right? Use that as a risk indicator and trip MFA. There's still ways to circumvent that, right? You get into MFA bombing and things like that. But it's a good initial signal and then feed into your MDR, XDR, your alphabet soup, and then kind of rally your response around that to kind of follow up with that end user.
I do want to jump in on one thing there, though, right? So we found a different way to approach MFA because, like you said, users don't like it, right? So the things that we start to look for is what I call frictionless security, right? Mm-hmm. The end user doesn't need to see everything that makes your organization secure, right? You don't see the gas going through the line or the cylinders pumping when you push the gas pedal, but the car just goes, right? So there are other ways to approach that too. So we use combinations of conditional access. Mm-hmm. If you're coming from a known device, like a hybrid Azure joined device, coming from a known network, and you've entered a username and password that's legit, don't prompt. Yeah. There's no need. Yeah. And then the user is secure, and they didn't even know it. And that's the biggest win.
Well, and have you found, and this seems to be a mounting or kind of evolving topic, right? Where MFA is very foundational, right? We feel almost everyone in this audience should probably have MFA enabled, right? So that's stage one foundational stuff. But what you just said, Noah, is interesting, where there are tools, I think, that are coming down the road that MFA, just traditional MFA, is no longer, it's the appetite there isn't the same, where these new tools won't prompt you because they know, hey, this is triggered every day for the last 5 days, and for the last 365 days, nothing here looks out of bounds. Let's leave this one go. And then for those that do look a little strange, jump on those, right? Which gets back into how quickly can you act.
And that's what I'm hoping for out of generative AI, is to get
That's
more
right.
towards frictionless type security.
Go ahead.
I can jump in on that one. Yes, but also there's a kind of internal kind of security industry looking ourselves in the mirror and understanding, or putting a new lens on the traditional aspect of MFA, right? It's two factors of authentication, and we've been heavily relying on password across the board for everyone.
Yep.
And I think we're at like an inflection point where maybe the password is a secondary option, but the kind of primary option may be some passwordless solution that may be biometrics, which presents
Correct.
different regulatory issues, but maybe biometrics and some other factor like a certificate on your endpoint, or just two factors of authentication that we can trust, and integrating that with kind of your AI-based behavioral analysis to detect when you should raise that.
When you force a step up authentication.
When you force a step up.
When
Exactly.
do you see that? So what that sounds like to me is that's kind of on the cutting edge of what's changing, right, from an identity perspective. But when will these biometrics and some of these things be just standard, right? So, and correct me if I'm wrong. You guys could tell me if
Aren't they already on your phone?
yeah, that's
So
right.
I think you answered the question. I think they're already standard. I think the key is how can we implement those technologies into our corporate environments in such a way that they're not more work than they're worth. I think that's really it. I mean, in an organization that has MDM and they supply the phones, maybe that can be an easy rollout. But in a lot of organizations, you have bring your own device, and now it gets extremely hard to do something like that, because now you have to worry about the credentials. They're safe on that phone, but once you transfer that credential to the internal AD system, now you have a problem as an organization. But it's already standard. The problem is how do we implement that at a large scale?
Yeah. It's a good perspective. Jeff, I'll kick the next question off to you because this is a conversation I know we're having quite a bit. But all right, the hybrid workforce, right? We threw a trivia question up. Splurge, that was Microsoft Teams, was the jump from whatever 40 million to 135 million, I think was. So I think we all knew that was COVID driven. But what that really opened the door to was the remote hybrid workforce, right? So the traditional LAN and WAN networks of our organizations seem to have gotten a lot more complicated, right? So William talked a little bit about this earlier, but maybe you can add some context to how do organizations adapt and protect the new normal, which is a more distributed network. What can they do? What do you see trending? Maybe add some context to all that.
Yeah, I mean we talked about, kind of brought this up in the data panel, right? Is gone are the days where everybody's inside my four walls, right? I can just lock everything down. That was changing already. We just got pushed into that faster than anybody thought with COVID, when we had to send everybody home, and now everybody's scrambling, going, I have the users working from home. That's, they're accessing data from home. I have to get data to them. I have to get information to them. I have to get applications to them. And so now, right, I've heard the saying, right, that data is the new edge. And yes, it is to some extent, because you have data maybe in places you don't have users, but I think users drive the edge further than data does, because my data is going to go where my user goes. And so this is one thing, and we talk about this a lot internally, right, is I get the things like zero trust are buzzwords that drive everybody crazy. And I hate that we get to a point where buzzwords make us not pay attention to things, but least privilege, right? In my mind, getting into a mindset of I don't know where these people are, right? They're not inside my four walls anymore. I cannot trust, right? So the new saying is, never trust, always verify. I think that's where we have to get. We have to talk about things like zero trust network access, but don't laugh at it. Don't treat it like a buzzword. Like William said, call it something else if you want to, but stop putting people on your network remotely. Give them application-based access, right? That's what ZTNA is all about. It's getting away from a VPN that puts them on the network and gives them an IP address where, guess what? A compromised machine can now scan the network, right? And can still see IP addresses. So take the IP address out of it, right? Network segmentation, micro-segmentation. Right? We have the tools to do this now. I think, personally, it's stopping us a lot of times is that pushback of it's getting in the way of doing business. And so I think that goes back to something you said is like they don't need to know all the controls that are there, right? So as we think about that security landscape, it's look at, can we put policies, can we put procedures, can we put the right controls that are giving that least privilege, that are taking access away where they don't need it, where they don't even know, right? They don't even know that those controls are there. Those things are out there, but we can't be afraid to put those in on our users. We have to, again, privilege access plays into this too, right? We're seeing more PAM-based solutions at the user level, right? Don't give them full access, but we can give them temporary access and then watch that and see how they use it, how it's controlled, just like we would do with PAM. We used to do all the time with IT admin. So, a lot of answers in there, but I think it all comes back to don't treat it like a buzzword. It is least privilege. It's taking access away. It's segmenting users from network, giving them access to just the things they need, just-in-time access.
Thankfully, software vendors are starting to come across, they understand that RBAC is extremely important. So they're providing in the applications, it was recent as 5 years ago, there are a lot of enterprise-level applications that didn't have RBAC. Or they had some sort of RBAC light, but ultimately trying to roll it out in an organization was almost impossible, much like network access control. If you ever tried to roll out network access control in a corporation that has global pops all over the world, you might as well run in circles and kick yourself because it's just not going to happen. Thankfully, one of the great things about COVID and the hybrid workforce is it pushed all of the problems that we were trying to solve on the internal corporate network into the forefront and forced us to solve a lot of those problems. And so software vendors, and I think the speaker this morning, focus on the architecture. I think if you can focus on the architecture, because ultimately it doesn't matter how big or how much budget you have, if you can start at the architecture level and start to know what assets you have on your network, even if you have to use what I like to call poor man knack, access control for devices, know who's on your network, when they're accessing, how they're accessing. Even if you don't have a large technology stack, you can focus on the small pieces of architecture and increase your posture extremely well across the organization.
Trell, any other thoughts there?
The easiest way to do it is start from a premise that the edge is dead.
Okay.
And then design your architectures on that basis.
Yeah, I think I've started to think of this as there's a significant collapse between the end user and the data. Like everything in between it's ephemeral, it's moving, there's a lot of variability in it. But if I start back from that data, understand that if that data is sensitive, I can kind of reverse engineer kind of the step-ups and controls I need in place to get to set data. This is one thing that I would recommend if anybody out there is going through this is be able to visualize and show the impact of your kind of zero trust policy engine. And because more times than not, the impact to the end user is lesser than what the loud voices in the room. If you can show all the authentication events and all the risk step-ups and kind of the risk that you've curbed and the business that you've enabled via data, I think it's a good report. They can use as theatrics for the board. But two, it also it allows you to observe the behavior of your organization as well.
So, in a past life, I did a lot of consulting for Fortune 500s to a Big Four, and you'd be surprised at how many organizations don't know. They know where their data is, or they think they know where their data is, and they do a good job of trying to protect it, but they truly don't understand how the business is utilizing that data. Mm-hmm. And so, what happens is now, if you don't understand how your users are using your data, how do you protect it? And so I think that if organizations, regardless of size, make a concerted effort to understand how their data is being used, it can make a lot of those initiatives a lot easier, because you can, much like the method of attack, if you understand where your data is how it's being used out in the business, you can develop strategies to help protect it.
Yeah. That's, as we were talking, you used a good word, which is theatrics, and from our client conversations, there tends to be, at least historically, this push and pull between the security team, SecOps, and communication not only to the broader organization, but even the C-suite and the board, right? So maybe for the folks in the room, I'd be interested to hear tactics or thoughts you have around how do you communicate the vision that you know will make your organization most secure, but let's use the word sell it in a way to the broader organization or the C-suite to get it done, right? Because that seems to be historically been an issue, but I'm curious how you all go approach that, and any recommendations for folks in the audience to try to sell that message to the broader organization.
So the way I approach this depends on kind of who the recipient is. More times than not, if it's internal, right, and it's kind of an internal initiative, say roll out a zero trust architecture, you start with the foundational strategy and roadmap and all the good stuff. You align to the traditional zero trust domains. I make sure that I can gather data from all of those domains and then roll it up into some sort of presentation with the bright colors and bells and whistles and the corporate branding, right? But when it comes to integrating and leveraging that foundational architecture to actually impact the business, that's when, as security, I feel like we have to get out in front and lead architectural charge outside of security. So I may have to go and work with the application team and then work with them and collaborate with them on a new technology rollout that I know in the back of my head leverages intra, right? Mm-hmm. So if it's leveraging intra, then it's inherent in our policies. We can roll it into conditional access. I understand which servers or hosts they're deploying it on. I know if we're plugged into that on the back end. So I'm securing it, but on the other side of the deployment, I can also give them data back to show utilization of their applications, right? So it's almost in their benefit to then come to security, because you get this kind of holistic view of utilization and where people are logging in across the globe and things of this nature.
Stop talking tech.
Right.
Learn how to speak in their language, right? If you're talking to the CFO, the CEO, or the board, they do not care about zero trust. They don't care about your buzzwords. They don't care about the terms, right? Talk to them in business capabilities. Show them how you're a partner of the business and that cybersecurity isn't the office of no. We're an enabling function. We do it securely. We do it as seamlessly as possible, and we allow you to operate at pace and scale. Yeah. You start talking in those languages, we'll give you everything you want. I can take my whole cybersecurity strategy for a Fortune 500 company and boil it down to two things. It's very simple what I told them the last time. The goal of cybersecurity is to protect the house from social engineering and known vulnerabilities that accounts for 70% of all entry vectors. Mm-hmm. And then focus on continuous improvement by maturing ourselves through the NIST CSF framework. And then you have a very simple process. Everything I do can be slotted in. Every purchase I make can be slotted into one of the 5 NIST CSF domains. So they know exactly how I'm plugging in, improving the organization, and helping them move the business along at pace.
How often are you consciously making that effort to communicate that? Is that annually? Is that quarterly? What's a good, Fortune 500 might create a different environment, but what's the right path?
For me, it's quarterly, right? But that's to the board. Internally, monthly town halls, and then I build bridges. I am very close friends with our Vice President of Communications. I got her gift the day she started, right? I know what makes me successful.
Very smart.
And then I say, hey, would you like me to take 10 minutes and go over cyber with your org? Absolutely. That's 10 minutes she doesn't have to talk anymore, right? I do it with infrastructure. I do it with sourcing. But you make yourself integral, because when you think about security, it's not a vertical. It's a horizontal. Yep. So if you aren't developing those relationships with those people, you won't be successful.
Flattery gets you everywhere.
Yeah,
it does.
And so some success that we've had, we implemented cybersecurity champions across the business. So we went out into the business units. We said, hey, VP, tell us someone in your organization that is a cyber, that they're the ones that are all talking cyber on their breaks. They're the ones that, we want those people to come in. We would bring them into the organization. We would share with them our strategy and the things we were doing. And then we would, like we heard another panelist say this morning, we want them to sort of be that business liaison for security. So they would meet with our teams on a monthly basis, and then they would bring to us what's important to the business, what's impacting the business, what's affecting the business, and then how could we work together to roll strategy out into the business so that when you do get to that board conversation, they probably have already heard from other parts of the business how you've impacted them. So now the conversation is not about all of the things that you typically would think you're talking about. Now it's about how can we do more of that to enable the business, because ultimately the board, they care about impact to shareholder, impact to brand and risk. They don't really care about all the technology stacks on it, because in a lot of cases, your board has no one on the board that's technology savvy. I mean, they read the journals and they have just enough knowledge to make your day miserable. And if you're lucky, you have a board member who comes from a technology background, and they can help provide some of that input long before you get there to explain. But I think, like Noah said, I think the key is to do all that work in the business beforehand, develop your security champions across the business, and a lot of that work gets done for you, and it makes it so much easier.
Yeah, I mean, I would say one thing I've noticed is that we kind of gone through these phases, right? And early on, and it was we had to operate within the confines of security. Right, our applications operated within the confines of what security had built, and then we moved into this phase as, cloud really drove this. Of now, security was reacting to what was going on in the organization, and security wasn't leading the conversation anymore. And we really have to get back to a point where security is leading the way that everything operates in, but it's going to look completely different than it did before. The good thing is, unfortunately, it's a good thing that's happening. It's unfortunate the way it's had to happen with breaches and attacks and all these things, but that businesses are now realizing this is an important factor, right? That security is important, not just the speed of which I get applications out, not just agile and DevOps and getting things to market fast, but that security has to be forefront again. And so I think going forward, we're getting back to that, which will make it easier. It's maybe not quite there yet in every organization, but I think we are seeing that conversation shift back to people, the C-suite being more aware of security because, unfortunately, of news, but it is awareness that is there.
We called that security by design, and we use that moniker when we're talking to the C-suite, such that as they develop their corporate strategy, security by design is baked into their top-down approach, so that when we come to the table to talk about it, they're already familiar with, we have to design that and build that in. It took us 6 years at a Fortune 500 that I was worked at before. It took us 6 years to get security to the table at the beginning of a business initiative. Usually, I know, speaking to the choir here, but typically security will be called after the rollout, after the engagement. We need to secure this. We have the compliance officers come in and said, you guys have a fiduciary responsibility. You got to have some compliance. Well, how do we do that? And then security comes in. Well, then it's almost too late. Thankfully, we got to the point to where with security by design, we were at least being brought into the conversation at some point before the rollout. But it's still, I think, a huge problem.
Yeah, and to kind of pull this all together, I lead our security by design team at Sealed Air, and a combination of that, we call it SXD, and just going out and building a relationship cross-functionally. Like, those security champions kind of create themselves because they know that I'm there. They know that I help up front with problems they won't have downstream, and those is a life hack. Those are also the best people to recruit into security.
They're also the first ones to get promoted in those organizations.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, really good insights. And to summarize, what I heard is share the vision, make it a win-win, try to communicate often, and don't talk tech. Yeah, which is.
I think Noah getting the communications arm on his side and doing, that's awesome. That's
Communications and sourcing.
Yeah,
Because if I got to buy things, I want it to go fast.
yeah.
You build a relationship with procurement and comms. Like, that's one of the first things I did was work with our corporate comms and figure out a communication strategy, get on their good side, and they help me with any type of immediate emergency release I need to do, kind of communication plan for a technology rollout. They're always there for
And
me.
having a good vendor's office relationship helps you with that supply chain. I know that keeps you up at night is supply chain, but.
So do personal $25 Amazon gift cards saying thank you to people.
Well, yeah, it's an opportunity for some of the folks to get out of their comfort zones. Those who have been in the weeds for a long time, that's a great challenge that I think everyone could get better at, is stop talking tech and talk business. But All right, last question, then I want to leave some potential time for audience questions. Noah, you mentioned this before, and to our point, we have MDR, XDR, SOC as a service, MSSP. It seems like this is changing every week at this point.
I think it's almost like the military. We have more acronyms now than we have actual
Yeah,
nouns.
and what's it boiled down to? Maybe business deliverables, right? Understanding what it is, business outcomes. So I know internally we track a lot of our conversations with clients, and the idea of outsourcing security to fill the talent gap, again, maybe a little bit of a marketing word, but the reality is, how are organizations, maybe talk about each of your organizations, how you're treating security operations and outsource security if you're doing it, the potential benefits it's offered, and then kind of furthermore, do you see that continuing to be a trend? Is outsourcing going to be more of a commonplace, if not kind of the best practice moving forward? So maybe, Noah, you could start just because we kind of segued from you initially.
Yeah, it depends on your approach, right? I want to build a lean team of very strong cyber leaders that are smaller, but I'm willing to compensate them highly because I can do more with 1 5 on the scale than I can with 4 3s.
Yeah.
Right. So when you take that into account, then you strategically go about what are the capabilities I need within my organization, and if you have strong people, kind of at your manager and above level, they can drive those relationships to where they need to be, and then you look for natural synergies. Like with our MDR, they also offer threat intelligence, right? I've tried to do threat intelligence programs forever. There's no value there if it's not actionable, right?
Yep.
So, but when you think about having that managed and driven by your MDR, so they are then responsible for it and you can hold them accountable for it, then the benefits of threat intelligence can become real. And I'm only talking tech because everybody in the room is tech. Right, and then as you build those capabilities internally, you can figure out where do I want to bring in internal talent and potentially, displace that managed service,
Yeah.
right? And there are some where you want to do that, and there are some where you don't, right? And that's all kind of based on the business's appetite for risk
Right.
and cost.
Well, and we've done a few of these, and what's interesting is maybe it is a journey, right? So maybe you have a managed service or an outsourced service for a number of years, and you learn the playbook, and you learn what you need, and then resources become greater, and you can build your team out, and that changes. But Eric, maybe for you, again, not to talk about the less resource filled organizations, but that's not always the case for folks, right? Some folks can't afford one security leader or engineer.
Well, and I don't think it's necessarily for the municipalities. I think it's small business in general. I think
Correct.
that as organizations are finding it harder and harder to train and retain good quality 5s, there's a lot of 3s out in the market that can fill in those roles in small business, but that's not necessarily a good thing. So I think that as businesses continue to try to innovate and be competitive, they're going to look to managed services as that way to have a lot more capability without a whole lot of necessary expense and payroll. I mean, and I've seen this in larger organizations. It seems to be cyclical, depending on the ebb and flow of the market. For a 3-year period, everything's outsourced, and then depending on how the markets turn, now you're going to insource everything because you can actually afford to have headcount again. And then the market turns and you outsource, and of course for a security organization that makes it very, very difficult, to say the least. But back to your original question, I think that managed services, and especially as the technology stacks are getting more and more capable, I think that more and more small businesses and small organizations are going to have to rely on that. And I think that's a huge market going forward. It's a very untapped market that some companies are taking advantage of already. But I think that that's going to be a huge driver for small business and small organizations and even larger organizations that want to save on headcount.
So we think the trend might continue, or at least there's no sign of slowing down.
I think it also depends on the industry, right? I'm in manufacturing. You're in manufacturing, right? We're not at the cutting edge of cybersecurity. We're there to protect the house, right? So why would I try to build world-class internal that I won't be able to keep because a manufacturing company isn't necessarily going to invest in that level of tech?
Yep.
When I can go to somebody like Arctic Wolf, when I can go to somebody like ReliaQuest, when I can go to somebody that's what they do,
Yep.
and they do it for everybody. I'd rather have that expertise.
You know, we say that often. It's you know, you want to match up with providers who do this day in and day out every single day. This is what they wake up to do.
Because their staffs are all fives.
Yeah.
I mean, they're all fives, and so for the cost of a 3, you've got a whole team of 5s. I mean, I'm being facetious, but
And they don't have to fight to send them to the conferences and the cybersecurity trainings, right, to keep them up because their business is to make money
Correct.
off selling cybersecurity services.
Yeah.
A manufacturing organization's
Not-
that's not my business. I'm not making money selling NDR services, right?
So
Yeah.
one thing I want to add to this too is I think everybody understands where that's justified, right, and how that's justified, and even in the sense of in a lot of organizations, as IT professionals, you're being asked to do a lot more than you used to be, right? You don't just turn knobs, you don't just push buttons, you don't just rack servers anymore. It's critical things that need to be done for the business, which means we need some of those services to come along. But to tie something really quick back to what was mentioned this morning and about, platforms for your business. And a word I always use is when I talk to customers about ecosystem. There are a ton of providers, right? I think within this room today, we have 8 to 10 MSSPs, MDR security providers, right? There are a lot of good providers. What I would say for your organization is what is right for my business, what is right for my ecosystems, what are right for my platforms that I have in place. Make sure you're making your choices on those because it is an extension of your business, it is an extension of your team. They need to match what your organization is, and there's enough of them out there that you will find one that will. So look for those things.
Yeah, it's one of the hardest jobs we have is everyone in this room is trying to identify who's the right partner and why and what's the long-term vision of their service and offering. So, did you have something to say now?
I was just going to say, when you find the right one, stop beating them up on cost. Right.
There you go. Yep.
I don't beat my wife up on her purchase.
Every vendor in
Did
here
you
just
see
silently
all
clapped.
these hands raised?
Yeah. Yeah, everyone just smiled. We get it. All right, so let's open it up for any questions if y'all have any. I know this is security is obviously a hot topic, but here we go.
So I'm actually not a tech guy, but I work on the cyber insurance side of things. And to William's point, offense versus defense, we're kind of defense, and this has been helpful to look offensively. With the sophistication of the way criminals are acting, and like recently we had a client that wired upwards of $800K to the wrong vendor, so they caught it. And where do you see that going in the future? I mean, I would assume that it's going to get more and more sophisticated, but now that they're on social media, they're using Teams, they've gone through email.
I mean, if you look at, I think it was the MGM hack, right? They basically leveraged LinkedIn and were able to socially engineer the help desk, right?
Yep.
You can't stop that, right? Like
all the tech stack in the world didn't
Yeah.
stop that from
Well,
happening.
one wrong keystroke, right? But when you ask where do I think it's going, right? And this is also where generative AI comes in, right? The threat actors already kind of started to leverage that. Phishing and other elements like that are getting much, much more sophisticated. But eventually what that boils down to, it's like back in the Cold War. Each side's building up with nukes, so it's going to be table stakes to play in the game is generative AI offense versus generative AI defense. And then what we bring to the table, we have to reinvent is what is our differentiated value in that context, right? How do we add it? How do we make it better? How do we improve that system? But it's going to be a continual game of cat and mouse, right? That's why I like working in it. It's like the Big Bang Theory. I'm always playing 3D chess with an unseen opponent. I don't know when they're going to punch me, and it's going to hurt, but it's still going to be kind of cool.
It's a glutton for punishment.
So I have something to
yeah,
add too.
go
So you said you're not a tech guy and you're in the insurance business. So my organization is an insurance provider. And so one of the things, I don't know about your underwriters, but one of the things that the underwriters are starting to do, they're hiring tech people like me to go out and provide these advisory services to their clients as part of their book. So when I go out and advise to a municipality, there's no charge. But for my organization as the insurer, it's the benefit is lowering the risk and then identifying the risk in the organization and then working with that to mitigate those risks. So as an insurer, as the insured, we're lowering the risk in the case of claims. I think we're going to start to see now. Currently, Most cybersecurity underwriters do not require any kind of baseline risk assessment. I think we're going to start to see with all of the breaches and the ransom payouts and things that are happening, I think we're going to start to see that they're going to start to require even the smallest of organizations to have some sort of third-party security assessment, which costs money. And so I think we're going to start to see that as a table stakes. You know, if you don't have a third-party assessment of risk, we can't even insure you, which is going to drive a whole lot more on that side of the business.
I have a favor to ask you though. Can you get back to when those questionnaires used to be like 3 pages instead of 28?
Trust me, I know it's paid for me too.
Well, I think I speak for the audience. We really appreciate you guys coming up, and this is obviously a hot topic for everyone, so we appreciate the insights. And I would encourage anyone in the audience, if you do have questions. Oh, is there a hand raised? Oh, sorry, go ahead.
So I've experienced all of the things we talked about, and we've got education on our thing. But I guess just recently moving to a larger company, I've now seen where threat actors are impersonating us, buying domains close to ours, and actually reaching out to other people. The recent one was HR saying, "Hey, you've been approved. Here's, you know, you're going to be filled in this role for job postings we had. Just click here to complete your thing and your background check fee." And now suddenly I'm worried about, okay, not only is it security, but now it's a reputation thing, that if someone gets scammed and it's our name, now that's going to be associated with that. And that's one I don't know how to fight. Like, I don't know a tool that I can go out and say, okay, show me all the domains close to mine that have been registered so I can go fight all of them.
Threat intelligence, right? So I have a managed takedown service on that.
Yeah.
So if it's anywhere close to it, it pops up on our radar. We tell how good or bad that is based on other scores of time of registration, topics, different kinds of things like that. And taking something down is really hard. Our legal team had tried to do it for this one site for 8 months. I got the managed takedown service. I was like, watch this. Click. Within 48 hours, it was down. And they're like, how did you do that? I was like, it's the magic of technology.
That's business talk.
There are third-party services that will monitor your domain spot, and then use managed takedown for you.
Because the registrars will send you a nice ticket. This is a critical issue. 3 weeks later, crickets, and no one will respond or even look into it.
And then everyone comes to IT and that's how to stop it.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's just the ones I know about because somebody just happened to report it because they were opposing us as people in the company, external.
Well, thank you all for joining us. Round of applause for the panelists, and thank you for all the insights. They'd be happy to talk to you, I'm sure, if you have any other questions.